So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. It should be a good show tonight. This is my weekly broadcast of the best clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the corporate media here in the United States, along with my commentary. And this week, in addition to the regular big five outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, I'll also be using some quasi-news clips from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher to cover several topics in the news, beginning with a clip of Bill Maher talking about the Washington, D.C. shooting that I'll be playing in less than a minute. And I also have a few other clips about the shooting and some breaking stuff about the Al-Shabaab terrorist attack on the mall in Nairobi, Kenya, and a couple clips on Syria, which was the big news the last few weeks, but is off in the sidelines now. A little on the 2016 presidential election, but most of the clips are going to be focusing on this big political fight in Washington, D.C., in which Republicans are threatening to shut down the government if Obamacare isn't defunded. And but before I get to that, as I said before, I'm going to start with this Bill Maher clip where he mentioned the diminishing coverage of the D.C. Naval Yard shooting in Washington, D.C. In this first clip.
I shouldn't ignore this. It was a giant story this week. We had another mass shooting at the Navy Yard in Washington, D.C., and we went through the whole ritual. We saw it on television and the news coverage, and then Obama spoke. And Obama said a few words about it, and then he went on to another subject. And I saw a lot of conservative commentators say, how dare he on a day of a shooting? And I wanted to say every day in America is a day of a shooting.
Plus, they should be, they should be happy because the entire argument that's been made by people who are sort of gun rights maximalists is that essentially, we are making too much of this, right? That this is just either the product of insane people or it's the product of just horrible things happening the way that sometimes 28-year-olds get stricken with cancer and that's terrible and stuff just happens and we pick up the pieces and move on. That is the argument that the right has been making, that the NRA has been making, that there aren't actually policy solutions to this and we shouldn't overreach. And so what they should want, their end goal should be a time which they've managed to achieve, and it's quite ghastly to contemplate, in which the president just says a few words about it and then moves on.
So I definitely agree with Chris Hayes there about the hypocrisy of Republicans who are criticizing President Obama for going ahead with this speech about the 5th anniversary of the Bush economic meltdown that was soon after the D.C. shooting. And I'm announcing here for the first time that I'm actually making an upcoming video, and it's titled Fox News Forgot Bush Economic Meltdown Anniversary. And it's going to cover some of the Fox News dishonesty on that topic, and but the fact that the shooting was already old news by the weekend was a little disheartening until I watched Meet the Press, and I got this reminder from this woman, Sandy Phillips, who was a woman who lost her daughter at the Aurora, Colorado shooting, and who reminded me of how long the Brady Bill took to be successful, and I'll show you that clip here.
Well, it took 6 votes over 7 years to get the initial Brady law passed, and Sarah and Jim Brady didn't give up. And those of us who are involved, and unfortunately our numbers are growing, we're not giving up. It will happen. We need to expand those background checks so this kind of thing doesn't continue to happen. And we need to give our law enforcement the tools that they need to get that job done.
But
So that actually is possible, that public support for background checks will overcome the NRA's money and power over time, and that seemed especially true. And let me just add in the clip here real quick. When I saw Wayne LaPierre, also over on Meet the Press, and let me load in that, and David Gregory, the host of Meet the Press on NBC, kind of called him on what he had said after previous shootings and how they didn't really fit this D.C. Naval Yard shooting. And here, let me just load up this last clip on the shooting, showing David Gregory challenging Wayne LaPierre here.
This is similar. After Newtown, you were outspoken in saying that more security was the answer. This is what you said after that massacre.
The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
This was the Navy Yard. There were armed guards there, Mr. LaPierre. Does that not undermine your argument?
No, the whole country, David, knows the problem is there weren't enough good guys with guns. When the good guys with guns got there, it stopped.
Now, of course, that is not true. In fact, one of the guns that the shooter was using in this Naval Yard shooting was a gun that he got from shooting one of the first people he came in contact with who was a good guy with a gun. So I was glad to see Wayne LaPierre. He doesn't seem to be winning this argument over time, because his arguments, like the big solution to gun violence is good guys with guns stopping bad guys with guns. Well, that doesn't always work. But, like I said, there was very little coverage of that shooting on the Sunday morning programs, especially on Fox News, which was sort of the headquarters for the criticism of Obama for not spending more time on the shooting. And there was, of course, this other big violent attack, which only got coverage in some places, this terrorist attack in Nairobi, Kenya, on a mall there. And first I want to show you Martha Raddatz, who was at the Naval Yard talking to people about the Naval Yard shooting. That's why she's in the background. You see she's not in the studio. She's actually at that Washington, D.C. Naval Yard where the shooting took place on Monday, and talking about this breaking news on what's going on with Al-Shabaab, which is an Al-Qaeda affiliate, attacking this mall in Nairobi, Kenya, in this clip.
Still unfolding overseas. Breaking news. The Kenyan government says at least 59 people confirmed dead after Al-Qaeda-linked terrorists stormed an upscale mall in the capital, Nairobi. Dozens of Americans were among those sent running for their lives. Several were injured, and there are still hostages inside.
So yeah, that's kind of definitely a nasty situation, and as they talk a little bit about how it's ongoing. They're hostages, and they're 59 people dead, but of course they weren't necessarily Americans, which is why it didn't really. I mean, I think there were like 4 Americans wounded, is what last I heard, and I'll show you. There was a New York Times photographer who was giving updates on what happened, and he talked about how hard it is for the military to defend against an attack on a mall, which may have, I hope it doesn't happen, but it could have implications for future terrorist attacks in the United States, about what it's like to try to defend a soft target like a mall, and I'll show you that clip here.
Yes, it was organized, but also very disorganized for the police and army who were in there trying to figure out what was going on. They were moving around in these big open areas where there's a lot of places for people to hide. There's a casino, there's a movie theater, a huge supermarket, and so there's lots of all these shops where at any given place someone could be there. So this is what made it so difficult for them as they were trying to both locate the assailants and also to try to aid civilians to get out of the mall.
And you can see there, before I switch back to my camera, that they have 30 Americans inside mall. The American media loves to cover how many Americans were killed, how many Americans were injured, and how many Americans were inside the mall, and also this idea of what it's like to take care of trying to defend a soft target like a mall. Also came up as the implications for the United States. Peter King was also on the program, and he's this right-wing Republican, well, right-wing in some ways, Republican from New York, who has made several anti-Islamic statements and is really hard line on anti-terrorism. and he talked about the American connection to Al-Shabaab in this clip.
Well, Martha, this was a very sophisticated attack, very similar to what we saw in Mumbai, and by all indicators, this was carried out by Al-Shabaab, which is based out of Somalia. When I was chairman of the Homeland Security Committee 2 years ago, I conducted a hearing on Al-Shabaab. It's an extremely deadly organization, very well trained, and is one of the only Al-Qaeda affiliates which actually has actively recruited here in the United States. There is at least 40 to 50 Somali Americans have gone from the United States to Somalia to be trained. A number of them have been killed, but there's others still alive. So I would assume that the FBI and local law enforcement are looking into those Somali American communities today for any leads or indicators, using all their sources and resources to make sure that there's no follow-up attempt here in the United States.
So there you have the explicit connection to the United States there made by Peter King, and that there wasn't that much coverage of the Kenya attacks, certainly not compared to a terrorist attack in the United States. And when there was coverage, they did sort of concentrate on the angle of possible threats to the United States and Americans who were involved, and it kind of shows what gets the media's attention. And on that topic, I noticed there was very little talk of Syria this week, which was like the main topic for the last 3 weeks. If you've been watching Liberal Viewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup, you'll notice there's been a lot of talk about Syria. And this week, I guess it's what they say about the drive-by media may be true, because like I said, almost all of the discussion was about this looming government shutdown and the Republicans trying to defund Obamacare, and I have a whole bunch of clips on that I'll get to in a minute. But I noticed it was Fox News that kind of concentrated on Syria for the purpose of just emphasizing one last time about mistakes Obama made and how this was all a big problem for the Obama administration and showed their lack of leadership. And I wanted to show you a setup. Chris Wallace over on Fox News Sunday was trying to say that 2 former defense secretaries from the Obama administration blasted the Obama administration this week. And I haven't seen the full speeches, but somehow I think if they really had blasted the Obama administration, the clips in which they did that would have been played on Fox News. And you'll notice that the clips of these 2 former Obama defense secretaries that they do play don't really blast the Obama administration. So I'll show you what I'm talking about in this clip.
It was a very curious and controversial path. A few days ago, President Obama's 2 secretaries of defense from the first term both blasted him for his actions in this whole Syria matter. Take a look.
When the President of the United States draws a red line, the credibility of this country is dependent on him backing up his word. When we draw a line and we give our word, damn it, we back it up.
Somebody asked the president the other day, do you trust Putin? My answer would be, are you kidding me?
Senator Leon Panetta says that if you draw a red line, you got to enforce it. Bob Gates says it's a joke to trust Putin. However we ended up here, didn't President Obama really make a hash of this?
So you can see there that Fox News is trying to spin the Obama success on Syria, or which may be a success depending on whether Syria ends up giving up its chemical weapons without any airstrikes. And I was glad at least to see that Missouri Senator Claire McCaskill was there on Fox News Sunday, and she kind of made that point, which I'll show you in this clip.
Well, I think it's very easy to always Monday morning quarterback in a really difficult mess like this is. There are no good solutions to this problem. There was no good answer. It's a civil war where we're not sure who the bad guys and the good guys are, but we did know that there were chemical weapons used. And what the president has accomplished, no matter how he got here, he's got Putin doing the right thing, and he's got Assad recognizing and admitting that he has chemical weapons and them moving in the right direction to get rid of them. And that's what this was about. So you can Monday morning quarterback the way it went about, the play calling, but the results are a win for national security and for the standard of our nation being the moral high ground in the world.
I just want to point out, it was Leon Panetta and Bob Gates, the two secretaries of defense who were Monday morning quarterbacking. Let me turn, if I can, to another...
Well, everybody was.
What? Pardon?
Everybody was Monday morning quarterbacking.
Okay. That's all.
So, yeah, there you see Chris Wallace is really trying to emphasize his original point that it was these two former Obama defense secretaries who were Monday morning quarterbacking and blasting the Obama administration. But at least from the clips they showed, I did not see any blasting going on. Both the things they said, that when you draw a red line, you have to stand up for it, and also that you shouldn't trust Putin. I think Obama said both those things, so I don't know how agreeing with President Obama really blasts President Obama. So anyway, that was pretty much the amount of Syria coverage, or those are the Syria clips that I'm going to show, because there wasn't much talk about Syria in the Sunday morning shows this week. Like I said, the great majority of the time was spent discussing this looming government shutdown. What's happened is the House of Representatives passed a bill. Well, let me back up for a second. The fiscal year for the United States federal government ends at the end of September. So October 1st, there's no funding for the government. So the Congress has to pass a continuing resolution to fund the government, and the House of Representatives passed one this last week, but they passed it that funds the government but defunds Obamacare. And so now they're sending it to the Senate, where there aren't the votes to defund Obamacare, and even if there were, the President Obama is never going to sign a bill that defunds a healthcare program that appears to be named after him, Obamacare. So the whole thing is not going to be successful. At least that's what all the Democrats and a large portion of the Republicans, as I'll show in a moment, say. But let me just add in a few more clips here. I'm going to show a clip of Bill Maher over on Real Time with Bill Maher, kind of making fun of the way the Republicans are putting these conditions on keeping the government from shutting down, and I'll show you that clip here.
Of course, the congressional Republicans who yesterday voted to defund food stamps and today voted to defund and repeal Obamacare. Oh, actually what they did was they passed a bill that funds the government if Obama repeals Obamacare, and shows them his birth certificate and punches himself in the face and touches a dead squirrel. That's... These people.
So yeah, it's pretty easy to make fun of the Republicans for threatening to shut down the government if Obamacare isn't defunded. But of course, that's why there are you can't find a Republican who's going to admit that they want to shut down the government, or even that the government is going to shut down, because they're all like pointing the fingers at each other because they're trying to say that the government shutdown is the fault of the other guy. And I want to show you how no one is admitting to wanting to shut down the government. Over on Meet the Press, there were there was a Republican from the Senate, a Republican from the House, a Democrat from the Senate, and a Democrat from the House. It's Republican Senator Mike Lee, who's one of the Tea Party Republicans behind this whole defund Obamacare move, along with Ted Cruz, who I'm going to show a few clips from later. And then there's Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar, who of course is not for defunding Obamacare. And then there's Democratic Congresswoman Barbara Lee and Republican Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn. David Gregory asked all four of them if they wanted to shut down the government, or if the government was going to be shut down, and I'll show you the quick results of that question here.
I want to start with a question for all of you, which is really a yes or no question. Senator Lee, is the government going to shut down?
No, we all know that the government's going to be funded. The question is whether it'll be funded with Obamacare or without.
All right, Senator Klobuchar, you think there'll be a shutdown?
No, because I believe in the end people of goodwill will come together and do the right thing and stop this political brinkmanship.
To the Congresswoman here, Barbara Lee, what do you say?
No, and we're not going to allow the defunding of the Affordable Care Act.
No, as much as the president wants to shut down, he's not going to get it.
All right, so...
So there you can see that the shutting down the government is kind of the hot potato that nobody wants to hold on to. They all want to like pass it to the other side and pretend the other side is the one who's trying to shut down the government. And of course the reason for that is because back in the 1990s, the Republicans actually shut down the government in a fight over a budget battle with President Bill Clinton. And over on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, though Martha Raddatz was subbing in for George Stephanopoulos this week, they showed a clip from 1995, the whole shadow looming over this fight, and I'll show you that here.
We're trying to get to a balanced budget, and we're trying to keep open the government. If the president will sign the bills, the government can stay open.
So yeah, that was the Newt Gingrich's Republican Congress back in 1995. And you see, even back then, he wasn't admitting to being the one who wanted to shut down the government. And I guess that is just part of this whole game. I wanted to show you a couple clips. First, I'm going to show you another clip of Amy Klobuchar talking about why the whole shut down the government tactic is not going to work. Here, I just have to load up a few clips real quickly here. So yeah, there are various polls that show even though Obamacare is not very popular, and that's because of people both on the right who don't like the mandate or universal health care at all, and people on the left who think Obamacare didn't go far enough, and I'll show a clip on that in a minute, but it's not very popular, but a government shutdown is even less popular, as Senator Amy Klobuchar pointed out over in this clip.
For this.
Well, what I can tell you is 58% of independents have said that they don't want to defund Obamacare if it means shutting down the government. That is a poll from Karl, Rove. The people I were with yesterday, the 5,000 people that were there to march to cure Alzheimer's, you want to tell them that their loved ones who have Alzheimer's are going to be delayed in getting a cure or treatment because the government's going to shut down? It makes no sense. And I come from a state that is a high-quality, low-cost health care state. And we want to see those kinds of reforms that we see at the Mayo Clinic go across the country. We do not want to relitigate the battles of Obamacare again. The House and Senate passed it. The president signed it into law.
So
the court upheld it. And will there be changes in the future? Yes. But the answer is not to defund it on a bill
here's what the House is.
So yeah, that was Amy Klobuchar making the argument, and I think a good argument about why shutting down the government to defund Obamacare, which has made it through, it's been passed by the Congress, signed into law, made it through the courts, all that stuff. But I also saw Chris Hayes back over on Real Time with Bill Maher, MSNBC's Chris Hayes, talk about how shutting down the government might not be that bad a tactic in the right circumstances, but it's just in this situation it seems to be so ridiculous, and I'll show you that clip here.
To your point about whether this is a fair tactic, I mean, I think it is useful to separate the kind of tactical question here from the substantive one, which is to say, like, if there were a liberal caucus in the United States government that could hold the continuing resolution hostage to try to stop a war that I thought was horrible, I would say, yeah, do it. The thing that they're trying to stop here is 30 million people getting health insurance. Right. Like, that's the substance here.
So, yeah, that is definitely true, but there are also, of course, a lot of Republicans who just don't see it, and I'm going to show you a few clips of that faction of the Republican Party. First, I'm going to show you another clip from Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn, who I think maybe now that Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann is out of Congress, I think Marsha Blackburn may be in the running to be the next Michelle Bachmann. She's actually, I think, the only female in the Republican leadership in the House of Representatives. And she definitely was towing the Tea Party line here and talking about how it's not the Republicans who want to shut down the government, it's Obama who wants to shut down the government, and I'll show you that clip here.
We're not trying to go through it. We know the president wants it because he wants control of the checkbook for discretionary spending. Republicans are committing to solving the problem of all of this spending in Washington, D.C. I mean, look at what has happened with spending since this president took office. Look at what is happening with jobs, with the economy. Look at what is happening with Obamacare and the impact that $2.6 trillion of additional expense is going to have on federal spending. We want to solve the problem. We'd love to have the president meet with us instead of going to meet with Putin.
So yeah, that's one of their talking points, how the president is meeting with Putin, but he won't negotiate with the Republicans on defunding his signature legislative achievement, Obamacare. And there was Marsha Blackburn tried to make that argument, but one of the leaders, along with Mike Lee, who I showed briefly before, is Ted Cruz, who I think is also running for president. He's a Tea Party Republican, and he was over on Fox News Sunday and gave an extended interview, and he talked about why he's going to filibuster the House bill, which doesn't really make sense, but he's going to filibuster. The House of Representatives passed this continuing resolution that funds the government after October 1st, but defunds Obamacare, and it's coming to the Senate, where Ted Cruz and some other senators are going to try to filibuster that bill to stop Harry Reid from adding amendments in that will refund Obamacare by a 51-vote margin. And I'll show you Chris Wallace questioning that strategy from Ted Cruz over in this clip.
Well, the first order of business is going to be to ask Harry Reid if he will agree to allow amendments to be subject to a 60-vote threshold. And that's typical in the Senate. We have a lot of amendments that are subject to 60-vote thresholds. Now, in all likelihood, he's going to say no, because he wants to use brute political power to force Obamacare funding through with just Democrats, exactly the same way he passed the bill 3 years ago. Now, if he does that, then Senate Republicans have the tool that we always use when the majority leader is abusing his power, which is we can deny cloture. We can filibuster and say, we will not allow you to add the funding back for Obamacare with just 51 votes.
Sir, if I may, you say that this is brute political power. Other times you've said it's a procedural gimmick. It's Senate Rule 22, which has been around for years. It's part of the Senate rules, and it says after you allow debate, after you take cloture, that you can pass an amendment by a simple majority. That's the rule.
Chris, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. You're right, that is one rule, but there is another rule that says it takes 60 votes to get cloture. And that's the reason the Senate generally, on controversial votes, we work out an agreement for it to be subject to a 60-vote threshold, because the minority, if the majority is going to run the minority over with a train, the minority has the ability to stop them. And so if Harry Reid says, you know what, I'm going to run the Republicans over, I'm going to ignore the bill passed by the House of Representatives, I'm going to ignore the will of the people, and I'm going to do this on a 51-vote threshold, then from my mind, it should be an easy decision for Senate Republicans to stand united and to support House Republicans. And I'll tell you, any vote for cloture, any vote to allow Harry Reid to add funding for Obamacare with just a 51-vote threshold, a vote for cloture is a vote for Obamacare. And I think Senate Republicans are going to stand side by side with Speaker Boehner and House Republicans, listening to the people and stopping this train wreck that is Obamacare.
Okay.
So, yeah, that is, I guess, the most coherent argument you're going to get for this strategy on defunding Obamacare, or passing a government funding resolution that defunds Obamacare, because Ted Cruz, Senator Ted Cruz there, is one of the leaders of this strategy, and of course it doesn't really make much sense from a lot of different directions, and all of his talk, one of the things I found most dishonest there was all of his talk about how he seemed to be implying there was something illegal or wrong or some sort of like cheating by passing this with just 51 votes. Of course, over in the House of Representatives, they passed this continuing resolution that defunds Obamacare without caring about what the minority in the House wanted. And there doesn't seem to be really any sort of end game on this as to how it is that this is, the strategy that Ted Cruz is putting up. I don't really see how it could possibly be successful. And you can see Chris Wallace asked Ted Cruz about that, and he tried to explain what his end game was over in this clip.
Well, I don't want the government to shut down. The American people don't want the government to shut down, and I don't think Harry Reid and President Obama should shut down the government. Listen, if that happens, if Harry Reid kills this bill in the Senate, I think the House should hold its ground and should begin passing smaller continuing resolutions, one department at a time. It should start with a continuing resolution focused on the military. Fund the military, send it over, and let's see if Harry Reid is willing to shut down the military just because he wants to force Obamacare on the American people. I think that would be a very perilous decision for Harry Reid to make, and the House can keep driving this. Look, the House is the only body where Republicans have a majority, and so the House has to lead on this. And I view my job and Mike Lee's job as providing as much support, as much air cover as we can for the House to stand up and lead, and I commend them for having done that last week.
Senator.
So yeah, that is Senator Ted Cruz trying to explain how he's going to somehow win through this strategy that only has a majority support in the House of Representatives. It's not going to get through the Senate. It's not going to be signed by the president. And yet somehow he thinks that by not giving in to this strategy, the Democrats are doing something that is unconstitutional or illegal or improper. And he's also getting a lot of criticism from other Republicans for it. And, the fact that he's getting confronted by Chris Wallace on Fox News. I mean, Chris Wallace does sometimes ask some good questions, but for Fox News to really go after Ted Cruz as strongly as they did, you have to know it's a big split in the Republican Party. And I wanted to, but before I get to that, I want to show you how Chris Wallace showed Senator Ted Cruz some of the tweets of Republicans attacking him, and then Ted Cruz says he won't throw stones at other Republicans, and then of course he goes ahead and throws stones at other Republicans, and I'll show you that clip here.
Congressman Tim Griffin of Arkansas wrote, so far Senate Republicans are good at getting Facebook likes and town halls, not much else. Do something. Republican Congressman Pete King of New York calls you a fraud. If he can deliver on this, fine. If he can't, he should keep quiet from now on, and we shouldn't listen to him. And Senator Bob Corker of Tennessee sent this. I didn't go to Harvard or Princeton, which you did, but I can count. Republicans, especially in the House, say that you are pushing them into a fight that you don't know how to finish. Senator?
Well, look, there are lots of folks in Washington that can choose to throw rocks, and I'm not going to reciprocate. I'm not going to do likewise. Listen, let me tell you about a broader problem. A broader problem is we have got career politicians in both parties in Washington who aren't listening to the American people. I spent the entire month of August traveling
So yeah, he says he's not going to throw stones at other Republicans, but then he says that there are politicians in both parties, including, that means other Republicans, who are career politicians who aren't listening to the people. So that kind of sounds like throwing stones to me. And there was also, later on Fox News Sunday, there was kind of an interesting discussion where Chris Wallace talked about how he'd gotten all this ammunition to use against Ted Cruz from other Republicans. And he was joined, Karl Rove, former Bush advisor Karl Rove, who I guess has been opposing this Ted Cruz shut down the government strategy, joined in attacking Ted Cruz over in this clip.
Karl, this has been one of the strangest weeks I've ever had in Washington, and I say that because as soon as we listed Ted Cruz as our featured guest this week, I got unsolicited research and questions, not from Democrats, but from top Republicans who to hammer Cruz. Why are Republicans so angry at Ted Cruz?
Well, because this was a strategy laid out by Mike Lee and Ted Cruz without any consultation with their colleagues. Mike Lee of Utah lays it out on July 9th without having ever brought it up at the Thursday meeting of the senators to say, we've got an idea. I would suspect today, with all due respect to my junior senator from Texas, I suspect this is the first time that the end game was described to any Republican senator. They had to tune in to listen to you to find out what Ted's next step was in the strategy. And look, you cannot build a congressional majority in either party for any kind of action unless you are treating your colleagues with a certain amount of respect and saying, hey, what do you think of my idea? And instead they have dictated to their colleagues through the media and through public statements and not consulted them about this strategy at all.
So, you know, some people ask me why it is I watch Fox News, and when Fox News started, there was this Republican Congress, and even though Fox News has always been very biased, I've always found it to be an interesting source to find out what's going on inside the Republican Party, because as the conservative news network, they have a lot of really good sources inside the Republican Party, and I think that last clip is a good example of why I like to watch Fox News, because all of their bias coverage doesn't stop me from being able to find out what's going on from people like Karl Rove and Chris Wallace reporting on how a lot of Republicans basically hate Ted Cruz. Of course, that's not news if you've been paying attention. But I wanted to show that. And I was also, because there is this split in the Republican Party, Fox News sort of uncharacteristically let this Democrat, Claire McCaskill, on to pretty much destroy Ted Cruz's argument and let her come on afterwards, which I thought was something you wouldn't normally see happen on Fox News. But I'm just loading up the last one here. So I want to show you this how Claire McCaskill responded to Ted Cruz's argument that there was some sort of improper power play here in not allowing the House Republicans to defund Obamacare and getting that passed in the Senate. And anyway, I'll show you that clip here.
Well, it's not brute political force that is refusing to defund Obamacare. It's called the American people in elections. I don't think in America we should throw tantrums when we lose elections and threaten to shut down the government and refuse to pay the bills. The American people had a choice last November. They had a choice between someone who said repeal Obamacare and President Obama. And not since Ronald Reagan has a president been elected twice by more than 50% of the American people. And look in the Senate. Every single Democratic senator who voted for Obamacare was reelected, most of them by double digits, Chris. And we didn't lose seats in the Senate, we picked them up. And even in the House, the Democrats got more raw votes than the Republicans. Gerrymandering gave them the majority.
So you don't want a Monday morning quarterback. Let me ask you, how do you think this?
So yeah, I thought that was a good argument from Claire McCaskill to refute what Ted Cruz had said about there being improper power play or whatever it was exactly he said there to stop the Republicans from defunding Obamacare. But it wasn't just Karl Rove and Chris Wallace who are on the Sunday shows refuting Ted Cruz, and it wasn't just Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill. There was also Tom Coburn, who was agreeing with not liking Obamacare, but also disagreeing with this tactic as not being something that's going to work in the real world. And this is a clip from CBS's Face the Nation with Bob Schieffer. I want to show you here.
Well, there was a tremendous demand among special interests to try to prevent this bill from totally being implemented. Because of the dangers to our country, the ultimate cost. I agree with them that if we could do this, we should do it, but we can't. And the political reality, you know, tactics and strategies ought to be based on what the real world is, and we do not have the political power to do this. And so we're not about to shut the government down over the fact that we cannot, only controlling one house of Congress, tell the president that we're not going to fund any portion of this because we can't do that.
What?
So yeah, there's Senator Tom Coburn recognizing reality and how there aren't the votes in the Senate, and there's not a president who would sign a bill to defund Obamacare. But there is this faction of the Republican Party that just isn't going to accept that reality, and you can see that when Bob Schieffer also had a Tea Party Republican or right-wing Republican Congressman, Matt Salmon, and tried to impress on him that in the real world this just wasn't going to work, and you'll see that argument didn't work on Congressman Salmon in this clip.
But you know what's going to happen. I mean, you can write this script now. They're going to strip out this thing to not fund Obamacare out of this bill in the Senate. They're going to wait till the very last minute. They're going to send it back over to the House, and then you're going to have to vote on whether we just shut down the government.
Well, I would hope that Senator Reid would take the voice of the American people seriously, that they would seriously try to entertain. If they can't come up with total defunding of Obamacare, then come up with another proposal. But have a straight-up vote on the floor. That's all we're asking. This is what the American people want. They've made their voice loud and clear, and we're simply trying to enact the will of the people.
But this is not the land of wishful thinking. This is the land of what's real and what's going to happen. And even if you pass this, the president would veto it, and there certainly are not 67 votes in the Senate to override his veto. It's law.
I would hope that the president would value keeping the government open over preserving a law that most Americans are against.
So yeah, that is the sort of tunnel vision or non-real world approach of some faction of the Republican Party, where they think somehow they're going to blame the President Obama for shutting down the government because he wouldn't defund Obamacare. And I think, at least in my opinion, my political analysis is that is not going to be how this is going to play out. I don't think there's going to be a government shutdown, and one of the reasons for that is it creates such a big opening for the Democrats to really destroy the Republican brand even further than it's already been destroyed. And there were some good examples on the Sunday shows of Democrats who are already making that kind of argument, showing how this just is not going to work for Republicans. And first I'll show you a clip from Democratic Congressman Chris Van Hollen, basically saying that it's insane. Or at least the insane faction of the Republican Party in this clip.
Look, there's a reason Republican senators like Senator McCain and others are saying this is absolutely insane, because the Republican proposition here is they're going to shut down the government if they can't deny health care to millions of Americans, including millions of kids who are right now benefiting from the Affordable Care Act, kids with pre-existing conditions who can no longer be thrown off of their insurance policies. That's right now. They're saying we're going to shut down the government unless we get rid of those protections, number one. Number two, I think Tom and his colleagues have to explain to the American people how they voted for a budget that includes all the Medicare savings from Obamacare, that includes the same level of revenue generated from Obamacare, and in fact, would not even balance in 10 years if not for the Affordable Care Act. So here they're running around the country on the one hand saying, let's get rid of the Affordable Care Act, and yet they passed a budget that only comes to balance because of it. And that's misleading, and that's a hoax, and they should explain that to the American people.
So yeah, that is a great argument. It shows how the Republicans are caught in this hypocrisy, and their argument doesn't make sense, their strategy doesn't make sense, and they also have this problem that it plays into the worst stereotypes, the worst typecasting or whatever of the Republican Party. And Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, who used to be Speaker of the House before the Republicans gained control, was over on CNN's State of the Union, and she showed how the Republicans can be portrayed in their worst light based on what they're doing here. That they're anti-government, and that's why they want to shut down the government. And I'll show you a couple clips on that, starting with this one here.
Let's be really clear about this. The Republicans put a legislation on the floor that was intended to shut down government. For them, that's a victory, because they're anti-government ideologues who dominate the Republican Party.
They wanted to defund Obamacare.
No, they want to shut down government. The effect of putting the Affordable Care Act on the bill is to shut down government.
So yeah, there's Nancy Pelosi saying that the Republicans not only not only is they want to shut down the government as a threat against Obamacare, but they just want to shut down the government because they don't like government. And you can see she went further and talked about the Republican conservative philosophy and played up the worst aspects of it in this clip.
Because these are people who do not believe in a public role. They think that Social Security has no place in a free society. That's why they want to privatize it. They think that Medicare should wither on the vine. That's why they're voucherizing it. So this isn't a good faith initiative. This is an excuse to again, hand it all over to their friends, the insurance companies, or again, not have a public role in this important initiative.
So you wouldn't agree to...
Now, what I found kind of interesting about that is that she was saying the Republicans want to hand it over to their friends in the insurance companies, but of course that's kind of what Obamacare already does. It's a very private insurance-centered plan or legislation that instead of doing what would have been better, a single-payer system where the government is you get rid of the private insurance and the government pays the doctors and the hospitals, and there's no for-profit middleman in the healthcare system. That's not what Obamacare did. And there was an interesting clip from, let me just load up the last few clips here real quick. There was an interesting final clip on this threatened government shutdown from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, and it has Chris Hayes in it and Joy Behar for just a brief moment in there. And Chris Hayes is explaining why it is that we ended up with Obamacare instead of single payer, and it was basically because Obamacare may not be the best answer for the healthcare system, but it is the answer that gets us in through the narrow type of navigation of legislation through Congress, and it's basically the only kind of legislation that could have made it through all the special interests. And anyway, I'll show you that clip here.
The issue here, right, is you end up with this perverse circumstance in which the only way to pass a bill is to create this massively complicated Rube Goldberg machine to deliver health insurance to people, because that's the only way to thread the needle between the different interests that are trying to kill it. Then once you produce this very complicated bill that is the only way to sneak through all these interests, people turn around and be like, man, that's complicated. I don't know if it's going to work. Well, it's only complicated because the only way to get a bill passed in the first place was this kind of jerry-rigged thing.
Would the single payer have been less complicated?
Yes, much less complicated.
But it never would,
and much more effective.
Yeah.
But let me show you.
So yeah, I just want to show that after all this talk about the government shutdown and Obamacare, I just wanted to remind everyone, how did we get to this point where Democrats are fighting for Obamacare, which a lot of people on the left don't even really like very much. That's why Obamacare is so unpopular. It's people on the right don't like it because they think it goes too far, and people on the left don't like it because they think it doesn't go far enough. And but people who are savvy about politics should realize that it was a very narrow plan that could fit through all the nasty special interests and actually get passed, and it just barely got passed anyway. So anyway, there are all the clips on the government shutdown and sort of the politics going on, and part of it has to do with preparing for the 2014 congressional election. And in some ways I actually agree with what that Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn said, that President Obama would like there to be a shutdown, because I think if there were a government shutdown, that's like the Democrats and Obama's only hope of winning back the Congress. It would be so bad for Republicans, which is why I don't think it will happen. Although, I mean, you never know. Those Tea Party Republicans are so right-wing, and it's not going to hurt their personal re-election to fight against Obamacare. It just might end up nationally hurting some Republicans in the 2014 and especially 2016. And there was a little bit of talk about the 2016 presidential election. First, there was this big interview with Hillary Clinton in New Yorker magazine And the author of that article was over on CNN's State of the Union talking about this supposedly his name is Joe Hagan, and I want to show you the supposedly breaking news he broke in his article and talked about on CNN here.
Well, she's come out for the first time here and said, you know, I'm thinking about it. So she's weighing it. I think that she's coming out during an interesting week when all of the Clinton world is gathering in New York for the Clinton Global Initiative annual event, and she's sort of sending out a message out there, two messages. One, she's thinking about it, and the other is that give me some time to think about it, or at least let's put it up the road a bit, because I think that she's concerned, or her staff is concerned, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves and have the, be seen as a front runner that's so strong, and like what happened in 08, basically, where she's,
Let me...
He never really finished that last point, but I guess what happened in 08 is that she was such a big front runner that always breeds all these stories about who's going to challenge the front runner, and the David and Goliath thing, and President Obama kind of, when he was Senator Obama, did kind of benefit from being the David and Goliath story against Hillary Clinton. But I don't think that was really breaking news that Hillary Clinton is thinking about running, but she wants more time. And there was some talk on some of the other shows about how it's a long-term media strategy to not get into the race too early, but to keep her name, consistently in the news, so that it doesn't seem so out of the blue when she finally does announce. Or, I don't know. I'm not going to prognosticate there. But there was also, I want to show you a clip from over on NBC's Meet the Press, where Chuck Todd, reporter Chuck Todd from NBC, was talking about this, a big donor conference or thing that took place with Republicans over this last week, and how all the big Republicans were there. And so it's sort of the fundraising derby is already taking place for the Republican presidential candidates in 2016, and I want to show you that final clip here.
The RNC is pulling out some big guns, the Republican Party, to raise money for the party. So it's not just the president relying on celebrities to sell Obamacare. The Republicans are doing it too.
They are, and it's a who's who of basically the 2016 field. You could argue that the nominee is likely from this group that's going to be at this fundraiser, co-hosted by Woody Johnson, owner of the Jets, big financial backer of Mitt Romney. But look at this list from Chris Christie, of course, is Woody Johnson's favorite of these six, but Rand Paul, Marco Rubio. So bringing in both sides of the party, establishment, a little bit of Tea Party, Libertarian wing. Be interesting to see who gets the most juice among these big donors.
So yeah, that I had that backwards. It wasn't this last week the fundraiser took place. It's this coming week. That's like an upcoming event to look for, and I think that's an important way to look at our presidential election process as sort of a money primary that takes place before the voting primary. And that doesn't mean that voters don't have an impact and don't have influence, but no one gets to the voter primary unless they win the money primary, or not necessarily win it, but do very well. That's one of the campaign finance issues. This could be the month I'm going to make that campaign finance, or I was going to try to do it last month, but that campaign finance video is definitely coming up, not the next video. But anyway, those are all the clips I wanted to show you. I did want to take a quick look over in the comment section. Looks like I have about 75, 80 viewers at the moment, and I wanted to give you all a chance to make your comments. Hold on, let me just make sure I got everything. Double check that I've got everything that I wanted to get here. Okay, so let's see. Looks like, yeah, I've got a whole bunch of comments in the comment section here. See if I can find a few on-topic comments from the viewers on the clips. By on-topic, I mean on the topic of the clips I was showing. Let's see, Andrew Blumenfeld says, LaPierre put la foot in la mouth. Well, that yeah, I don't think his arguments are just, like I was saying, are getting worse and worse. Although Cherry Dog 9 says more guns. I guess he's just sort of making fun of LaPierre's argument. People are talking about where I'm from. Sacramento is where I'm in the Sacramento County. Not Sacramento City, just in the unincorporated part of the county. Cherry Dog 9 also says that Obama's success was accidental on Syria. Putin gave him a lifeline. Well, it's hard to know exactly what went on behind the scenes there, but you have to give him credit for navigating it. And I especially, I took a long time coming out against the U.S. airstrikes, and so I ended up being opposed to Obama in that sense on Syria. But I was actually impressed with his difference from George W. Bush on Syria, where, as you may remember, when, not George W. Bush on Syria, George W. Bush on Iraq, you may remember on Iraq that George W. Bush went and got his authorization to use force from Congress as a way to threaten Iraq, and then Iraq actually let weapons inspectors back in, but Bush wouldn't take yes for an answer, and when the weapons inspectors didn't find weapons that didn't exist, he went ahead with the war in Iraq anyway. And I think that we should at least give President Obama credit for the fact that even though he was threatening the use of force, he actually didn't end up using force when he got a deal that fulfilled his goals, or the goals he stated, and it looks like it might actually work, that there's not going to be chemical weapons, there's not going to be weapons of mass destruction in Syria anymore. And if that turns out to have worked, I at least have to give President Obama credit for that. Let me see, why are people marking things as spam? Just because this got NO8549 says, did you see Koch brothers funded anti-Obamacare ad with Uncle Sam holding a speculum over a young gynecology patient? Yes, I actually almost showed a clip from that, but it was like too long, and it showed this, but it showed like a quick clip from that. You can see that over on Real Time with Bill Maher, and then they also talked about how it was really creepy. It was like this Uncle Sam, like big head puppet kind of, like you'd see at Mardi Gras or something like that. It was like this big creepy looking Uncle Sam head holding a speculum and coming to like into the gynecology examining room. And of course the big hypocrisy there is it's really the Republicans who've been passing all this legislation on, like intrauterine ultrasounds to get an abortion, and it's really I think that may backfire on Republicans. So yeah, I did see that, and that was one of the worst things for me. I don't think that ad's going to work very well. So let's see here. I'm at about an hour, and I don't really want to go much over an hour. Let's see if I can find like one more on question or on topic question or comment here. Somewhere near the end. Show all this stuff here. Warren for president, Steve Enever. Another clip I didn't show was how the Democratic candidates are doing in the polls, and it's like a huge, can't remember if it's a majority or a plurality of Democrats are supporting Hillary Clinton, and then it's like 10% for Biden, 7% for Elizabeth Warren, and then a couple other like even lower level candidates. But I mean, that's the thing about Hillary Clinton being the nominee or the front runner. I think there's still a lot of people in the Democratic Party who don't like Hillary Clinton and think she's too establishment and too right-wing or centrist, however you want to call it, and are looking for someone who's more of a challenger to the establishment. And so I think there might be an opening for Elizabeth Warren or someone like. And the same thing could happen to Hillary Clinton in 2016 that happened in 2008, although I think she is the odds-on favorite to win the nomination. But anyway, I think I'm going to finish up the broadcast here. Should I show Sandy here in the broadcast? Sandy, come here. Sandy, show her. Show everyone your. Come on, Sandy. Look, there's the puppy. Okay, well, thank you all for joining me, and you got a quick look at Sandy there. I hope you all look out for my upcoming video. Fox News forgot Bush economic meltdown anniversary. That should be coming up probably in the next 48 hours. I'll be posting a notice on my Facebook page, liberalviewer.com/Facebook. Facebook.com/liberalviewer. Excuse me, got that all backwards. And thanks for joining me. I hope you have a good rest of your weekend. And or for my European viewers, I hope you have a good end or beginning of your week, it being Monday there. And see you all around the internets.